If you're like me, you've got contacts in every single possible format. Email, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And it's becoming harder and harder to stay on top of them. To help me make sense of this mess, I use Smarter Contacts, the free app that automatically creates rich profiles for all my contacts right on my smartphone. The thing I love most about this app are the rich profiles it creates. I can see photos, job titles, company details, and updates from social networks all in one place, all in context. This is a free app and available on all mobile platforms. Head to www.untether.tv/smarter to download it today. Hello everybody, and welcome to Untether.tv. This is that place you come to hear these stories, these great stories of companies that are forming, building, paving the way for us in this mobile space, changing industries, all in one leap. Great leap over buildings, and that's so much fun to be a part of this. And I've got a question for you guys out there. The question is, what is it about, the restaurant industry that you wish mobile could enable a little bit more? Is it, is it faster checkout? Is it ordering on the go? Is it, really leaving your opinion about that surly server or the bartender or the cold food? What is it about this industry? I know that it's about to go through a massive upheaval if it hasn't already started yet. And one of the companies in the middle of all of this is a company called ORDR, where these guys are enabling their customers to go out and literally take orders through the web, through mobile, and that's where we're going to focus. What is the disruptive force in the restaurant industry when it comes to mobile? And with me is the founder and CEO, David Bloom, from New York City, right? The center of the universe when it comes to, per square footage of restaurants versus humans. Is that about right, David?
More eaters and more people serving those eaters than anywhere else around.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? The amount of restaurant activity that goes on in New York City. It's like density, everything like that. Welcome.
And it's everything from the brilliance to the horrible, but it's all within 20 feet of you at any given time.
It's exactly
great.
it.
I love it.
Well, David, I thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you doing this. Before we get into this, I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to hear a little bit about it. But I got to tell a story about New York City. Is that apparently Times Square is not good eating.
Yes, true.
Right?
True. But one of the most trafficked restaurants in New York City is in Times Square. It is the Red Lobster in Times Square. I have been told, more volume than any other restaurant on the island of Manhattan.
Well, I can believe that. And there's this Indian restaurant somewhere around 42nd, 43rd, and 7th where I saw Gordon Ramsay do a show, and we've never eaten there, thankfully. But I all of a sudden I will never eat in that I don't know, that 4-block radius around that.
Right.
It's terrible. I can't even talk about it. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
Right. We'll talk about better things.
Yeah, exactly. Business, mobile, all that stuff. We'll just leave the cockroaches to Ramsay. I got to know, for people who haven't heard of you guys or what you're doing, why don't you just give a quick overview of what ORDR is, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So ORDR is, we are an e-commerce API for the restaurant industry. We have a suite of APIs, effectively different products, that can be used to turn any website, any app, really any internet-enabled device into a way you order food. And we connect all those products back to thousands of restaurants across the United States. And actually, just last week, I got my first Canadian contract. We hope to go live with them later this year. So coming soon to a country near you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Canada.
Is this
and is it a city in do you know, can you name the city, or is it a chain?
No, it's a restaurant group in Calgary. So there are about a dozen restaurants now, but they're growing pretty rapidly. So it should be we're looking forward to it.
I love it. Well,
yes.
So your history is in your work experience is in the restaurant business, isn't it? What is it like?
I would say I worked around restaurants. So I was at American Express for many years on their restaurant team. So American Express has people who care about the different industries where merchants accept the card and where people spend money.
Yep.
My lucky job was to be the restaurant guy, or one of several people, and I ran the restaurant strategy, industry relations, and business development team.
Okay.
So really understanding what it is that makes people spend money in restaurants. And then after that, I ran operations at an online food ordering website for a while before starting ordering.
Well, so is this your first startup that you've started?
Yeah, this is it. This is my first one, my first startup baby.
And yeah, it is that, isn't it? And we were
Yes.
talking before we actually started recording, is that with Startup Baby, there is baby as well, right? You have a 2.5-year-old.
Yes, two kids.
2 kids.
Yeah, I have a wife who's saintly. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 9-month-old.
A 9-month-old. It's like,
Yeah.
it's torture.
It is, in some respects, he's easier than my 2.5-year-old because, he naps regularly and he doesn't, he's just starting to be mobile now, but she has opinions.
That's really where it gets difficult, doesn't it?
The mobility and the opinions.
So, what was it about this idea that, made you step out into this entrepreneurial world and leave behind, the comfort of, Amex, big, smaller company in the food ordering company. But what was it about the idea that you said, listen, we got to do this at the same time as you have a 2.5-year-old and a 9-month-old?
I think a little bit of it. So this was not an idea that came to me in just a big aha moment. I know a lot of entrepreneurs just have that flash and they go for it. This was something that evolved over time. And it was born out of the recognition that fragmented industries like restaurants do better when they have some kind of efficient organization solution. And there's a platform that connects them more efficiently to buyers and sellers. Otherwise, in those fragmented markets, there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency and friction. And I looked, this is back when I was at American Express, I looked at my colleagues who worked with airlines or with car rentals or all these other consumer markets, and they had distribution services that they could tap into to access a fragmented market. Or markets tend to consolidate. But there was nothing like it in restaurants. It was just that transaction in restaurants, which we do, as collectively, tens of billions of times a year, all happens because the coffee shop is on the street corner where you get off the subway,
right,
or right by your office. If it's a block in any direction, you don't even know it exists, possibly. And the ability to bring that kind of hyper-local market to and organize it in a national way just struck me as so important for an industry, but also for the way we interact with that as consumers interact with that industry, that it had to be done. So we set out to do it.
The restaurant industry, I spent 10 years or 11 years in the restaurant industry as a waiter, as a bartender, as a failed cook, prep cook, terrible prep cook. But it always struck me that I worked with in my city, some of the more successful restaurants, the ones that had the right location and had the right brand and the right offering. But the restaurant right next to us was never as busy. So it always struck me as odd, right? I love the restaurant industry. It would be something that I would never ever get into full time because the success rates are so low, and I always struggle with how are these companies, how are these restaurants staying afloat, and I some of them, most of them disappear over a short period of time, but. Is that the problem that you're attacking here? Is, listen, we're going to try to help you guys bring business into your doors. Is that what you're trying to do here?
Yeah, I think so. I'll rephrase it. I will say what we're trying to do is help restaurants connect with customers in new ways that drive transactions.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're not necessarily about getting that customer into your restaurant, and we're not about helping you sponsor the local Little League team. We're all about creating new channels for you as a restaurant, whether you're a big chain or an independent operator, to acquire new sources of orders.
Okay.
In almost any other industry, you have interactive channels that let you bring your products and get them in front of customers. But the restaurant industry almost exclusively forces the customer to come to it.
So true.
Even in the internet age, we created online shops for the restaurant, or virtual food courts, like the mall model goes online.
Yeah.
Still, the customer comes to that.
Yep.
What we think is important is creating a new channel that doesn't force the customer to stop what they're doing and come to the restaurant, but for the first time ever, bring that restaurant and the ability to transact with it to that customer wherever they are. And in part, that's why mobile is so critical to this, because we want to reach that customer not when they're tethered to their desk necessarily, although there are interesting opportunities for that too, but create a ubiquitous ability for restaurants and consumers to transact.
Okay, so what's a good example of, in the mobile space, doing just that? Instead of me being proactive and coming to your website as a restaurant, that restaurant interacting with me through the services that you guys offer. What's an example of that?
So there's actually many. So we don't necessarily build every app or launch every website. What we do is have the APIs and the code base that makes it possible for someone to very efficiently create and launch their own food ordering application or embed food ordering in what they already do.
Okay.
So if you can imagine all those local restaurant information and discovery apps that exist, of which I've personally met with dozens of them, what they lack is that last mile connection to the transaction. So for restaurants, it's lovely that, their cuisine and their address and their phone number is out there on the web in these mobile applications where someone can discover it. But if you actually put the ability to click to order right there in the app, you would close that last mile and let restaurants actually do what they need to do, which is earn money from their customers, not just engage with their customers. That's where we come in. So we literally are working now with, I would bet, I don't know, north of 20 different mobile developers who are building their own food ordering applications. And these are just the independent developers. We're working with some pretty large-scale clients who are working with us to build custom applications to serve particular needs. It's really what is most exciting here is the breadth of opportunity and innovation that gets unleashed when you give mobile developers the ability to drive transactions.
And I think that's the key, right? So you've got an API that's available for developers, and then you're working with some of the bigger restaurant chains yourself. Is that right?
We're working with some of the big restaurant chains and also big global brands who recognize that food and the restaurant category are critical for driving consumer engagement. In the U.S., people order from restaurants either to eat in or to take out 70 billion times a year. That's more than 200 for every man, woman, and child in the country.
That's insane.
So if you are a brand, I know, and its food is emotional as well as a physical need. So if you're looking to connect with consumers, there's almost no universal category more powerful and relevant across every demographic than food in the restaurant industry. Yeah. And that's why getting local is so important, because that's where those transactions happen and why mobile is so critical. So that's why when we work with big brands, they're looking for ways to differentiate themselves with a relevant service, drive transactions in new ways, show local relevance, and be there where their customers are in ways that matter to them.
So I got to ask, I worked in the restaurants, and typically technology is kind of not adopted very quickly, right? Inventory, is done on a piece of paper, and it's kind of estimates at best. But my question now is, when you approach them, some of the bigger restaurants, some of these companies that are servicing them with what you guys are offering, do they get it? Do they scratch their head? Is this just the right time? Do you think that's probably why you stayed at Amex and you didn't initiate this business right off the bat? What is their reaction then?
Well, I think there's a couple things happening here. One, I think there is an awakening in the restaurant industry, and in a lot of local small independent commerce categories, but especially in the restaurant industry, there's an awakening to the power of technology to improve their business. So you see an awakening around the POS space, those point of sale services, lots of innovation happening there. Websites, you used to be able to ridicule every restaurant for having, flash-based with music playing, these terrible websites that were created by someone's 15-year-old nephew. Yeah. But that's changing now. And e-commerce and mobile commerce especially are becoming topics of conversation in the restaurant industry in ways that they never were before. So I give the restaurant industry credit. They're a little late to the party, but they're getting there. And there is starting to be that interesting hockey stick So if you, in terms of e-commerce adoption, and I think fast following that is mobile commerce.
I mean, when you look at the restaurant industry, right? What we're talking about here, and we've seen it really in a lot of industries, kind of go through this transition, we'll call it, where in the early days of the web, people just took their old business model and threw it up onto the web, right? This is just another advertising medium, a brochure.
Yep.
Quickly changed in 2000, 2001, 2002, where e-commerce really became, something that people looked at. Now, what's happening here is that, new businesses were formed during that time, right, around this new technology. So now when I look at mobile, it's the same thing. We've got restaurants, and it's a traditional restaurant since the dawn of time. And now we're trying to figure out how to use that restaurant, bring that restaurant and the functions of a restaurant, which is ordering food and eating food, into the mobile space. Do you think that the impact here that mobile brings is a different style of restaurant, a new style of restaurant? Do you think that restaurants have to change this, this whole seating pattern? I mean, what's about to be uprooted here? That was a long way to ask that question.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually a very interesting question, and I think what is not about to be uprooted is the restaurant industry. I think in many retail categories, when e-commerce took root, and now especially mobile over the last few years, whole new businesses were created and destroyed.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's going to be that destruction, the destruction in the restaurant industry, because at the end of the day, restaurants should not fear these technologies. These help them.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to create a pure play mobile restaurant. That doesn't exist. In the same way that Amazon created a pure play internet enabled bookstore.
Yeah.
So restaurants shouldn't fear this. They should embrace it. But I think what's important for restaurants to understand is that the mobile customer, in the same way that the web-based customer, is not the same customer that they get in their store.
Right.
They don't consume content. They don't transact. They're not looking for the same kind of information. And that's why you see restaurants with fancy fonts and Baroque music playing on their Flash-based websites, because they think, if I just replicate my store, my restaurant online, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That actually is terrible. And you often see restaurants who accept terrible technology because they don't understand. But that will change, and you're starting to see slowly, but you're starting to see not just m-commerce adoption and more sophistication around the impact of mobile technologies on the restaurant business, but you're starting to see smarter decisions being made about it. A little bit better design in the product, smarter attention paid to the content that you put out and how you put out content.
Right. Twitter,
Facebook, responding to negative comments on Yelp in a constructive way instead of either ignoring it or worse, not even knowing it happened.
Right.
You're starting to see better behaviors and smarter behaviors.
And, yeah, you're right. And innovation happens around around every industry. But I wonder if there will be an innovative company that comes up with that way of creating a mobile-only or a mobile-first restaurant type of experience or takeout experience where that restaurant didn't exist before. I don't know how it would work, but I've watched mobile uproot and destroy industries that were indestructible, shall we say. That nothing, there's no way that this industry is going to disappear, or there's no way that this company is going to disappear. And look what's happened. It's cut a swath through some of these big brands.
I think that there is a role to play for technology-driven restaurants, right? In the way that they capture, manage, and utilize their data.
Yeah.
A way and the channels they use to engage with customers and what that does to inform them. And there are even some interesting restaurants emerging now that are all around pickup and delivery. So then it becomes even more. You don't have a storefront.
Right.
You don't have. You can't say, the decor was beautiful when all you have is a website. So they have to be much smarter about how they connect with customers and leverage technology to do it. But those are still iterating off of old business models. There have always been delivery-only restaurants. This is just taking it to a whole new level. But what I do think is going to be very different here is that the nature of the communication between a restaurant and their customer is very different now than it used to be. And
Go
that,
deeper into that, because
it's very interesting. People go into the hospitality business, they go into the restaurant business, for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's just a job, right? It's the first job you get when you're in high school.
yep, it's good money.
But others do it because they're passionate about it. It's hospitality. There's the community of the table, and they love talking to people. And when you put those conversations online, or allow people to have much more sort of unfiltered conversations electronically, where they're less constrained perhaps by social niceties, suddenly that the nature of the conversation you as a restaurateur used to have with your customer is very, very different.
No kidding.
And especially mobile, where people can just instantly type in some notes in the 5 seconds that they give it mind share, and then they move on to the next thing. That is what I call, and that the military refers to as the fire and forget method. You launch that negative missile at the restaurant, and then you move on to checking someone else's email, your email. How does that restaurant engage? It's a big challenge, and there's a whole generation of leaders in the restaurant industry that are behind, and they're going to have to catch up.
And I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, I've spent some time with some of these companies that are doing not only check-in stuff, because that's everybody jumped onto that right away. Mayor of a restaurant or a coffee shop. But who rate everything. I think of Milk, for example, Milk Inc. and Kevin Rose's company, when he talks about Oink, right? When you can actually say, listen, I hated that chair in that restaurant, right? It was the most uncomfortable chair I've ever sat in.
Right.
So there's a torrent of data that comes in like this, and to be able to monitor, just because these devices enable, as you said, that conversation, not anonymously, but they enable that conversation in real time. And the opportunities are there for those restaurants to embrace it, or to bury their head ultimately and run away. But how are they dealing with that kind of stuff?
Well, I think there's an emerging set of tools that are helping small business generally control their interactive presence and the way they engage. But what it requires is a restaurant to recognize, or really any small business, but let's focus on restaurants, recognize that it has to be done. Right? You wouldn't put out soiled linens or have a messy bathroom. Every restaurateur knows that's just the price of admission to being in this business, right? You got to have a clean restaurant. They've never been trained. They didn't grow up thinking, I better have a clean online experience and a clean conversation with my customers when they're out there in the world. But now they have to. So there are some emerging tools that are helping them. Lots of these social media management tools. But restaurants are tough, right? Because you don't work in front of a computer all day, right? You better be savvy enough to have that phone in your pocket with the right kind of alerts set up so that you always know when people are talking about you. And I think restaurants will get better at this, but they are not doing it, I'd say, fast enough.
No, and I see that there are it's like a freight train running here, because and the restaurants are scrambling to catch up, and because it's not as much. I mean, it is. It's about the food. Like, you've got to face it, right? I mean, restaurants is about I like the food or I don't. This sushi is exceptional. That is not. Right? This is a full restaurant. That is not. But it comes down to a number of things around social and around the experience, and the environment and the food. So it plays into that.
And I would add that I think the commerce, which is there's how you talk to your customers, then how do you get money from them in exchange for your product, right?
Right.
That is something that I think a lot of restaurant operators are opening their eyes to, and that's why we talked a little bit about it before. They're demanding a little bit better product, or they're using product at all, right? Online ordering, mobile ordering. Yeah. They're working with some of the larger food ordering portals or their local delivery service that may have a website. So I think restaurants are starting to awaken to this possibility. But it's a little bit like generational change is going to have to happen here. That every restaurant manager is a generation behind because they don't have that same interactive experience that other people do. Right. So commerce is going to have to be very savvy about how they engage with restaurants and make it as easy as possible, and provide products for customers that succeed. Because the restaurant may not know what's the best product when it comes to online ordering. So the creators of that product are going to have to do a better job of making those products and then educating the restaurants about why their product is better than someone else's product.
So how is it that, how do you make money off of this? I mean, I can understand you're enabling your customers, which are ultimately the restaurants, through maybe some intermediaries, through the API, use of the API, but your customers, they can make some money by, and I want to talk about that in a second, by enabling more transactions. How do you guys generate the revenue that you need to?
Our whole business is predicated off the idea that the restaurant industry already has ways of doing business, and if we can minimize our impact on that, we'll be successful.
Right.
So the restaurant industry already knows how to work with catering brokers and party planners, and they give a commission for those orders, right? When for 15 years, when you worked with your local food ordering portal, you gave them a cut of the order.
Yep.
So we work in the same way. We take a cut of each transaction. Minimally, we know what restaurant margins look like, so we take enough. And then, interestingly, we share a piece of that back with our clients who build these apps. Generally speaking, I mean, there's different models that it can work, but generally speaking, we take a cut from the restaurant, and then we share a piece of it back with whoever builds the app or deploys the food ordering widget.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and what kind of impact can restaurants? Is it too early to know what kind of impact the restaurants can expect or should be expecting when they start to implement something like this? Because I can understand their margins are, except for on desserts and pop, right? Their margins are terrible, are thinner, and so they'd be more reluctant. So when you go in and talk to them, do you pitch them and say, listen, this is what you should be able to expect as a result of implementing something like this?
So the facts of e-commerce in the restaurant industry are very clear. Higher average transaction, higher margin items, fewer kitchen mistakes, and new customers acquired.
Yeah.
So the basic economics of e-commerce and m-commerce are very positive for the restaurant industry. The fact that they have to pay a little bit to get their website built or deploy their software or pay a commission to someone like me, quite frankly, they come out net ahead. I don't want to say this with everybody they work with, but generally speaking, they're probably coming out net ahead when they have when they pay a modest commission or a modest monthly fee or a combination of both.
Yeah.
So, but there is some education. I've told restaurants that on average, the average ticket from an online order is 15% higher than an offline order. So you should be able to pay me 15% and come out neutral. And they say, no way. Either I don't believe it, or, no, but the cost of serving an online customer is so much higher, even though that's totally not true. So, this is also an industry that's born negotiating over the price of potatoes, right? Yeah. So you got to be a little bit cautious about that. But what our particular model is all about is taking advantage of what that restaurant already does. So in our case, we only work with restaurants, at least so far, that already have some kind of commerce system deployed. They take orders from the web, from a mobile device, either their own or somebody else's app. We rest on top of that. We link into that. And therefore, there's no new operations, no new software to deploy. You don't have to train your staff. So we are an extremely lightweight channel partner for them. Much lighter weight than when they made their first decision to sell online. So for us, the conversation is actually much easier than it might be for somebody else or if we had a different approach.
Yeah. And I like that. Starting from scratch, explaining, as you said, education. The great thing about mobile is also is the pain of mobile is that it's the opportunities are so incredible, right? For small nuanced changes that have a big impact on a lot of these businesses, but that to get that small nuanced change, to get the business to do that change, is an insane amount of education. Right? It is an insane amount. And you never want to be the guy that has to go in there to educate and not get paid. And then they go to somebody else who pays them to do the service that you've just educated them on.
That's right. I get a lot of startups in the restaurant space come to me and say, how do I sell more effectively to local restaurants? How have you built your restaurant network so well? And I say to them, you're not going to like my answer because I built my entire model off of not having to talk to individual restaurants. Yeah. I talk to the technology providers that they're already working with. And I did that because I know how hard it is. Look, you can only sell to a restaurant between maybe 9:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning and 2 and 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And that's only, and you're probably going to be doing it face to face, sitting at a four top in the front of the restaurant while someone's cleaning glasses around you.
Yeah.
So you really need to understand what that sales process is like, all the other things running through that manager's head while you're talking to them. And that's why so many people break their backs trying to sell into restaurants. And also, all too often, since technology is not top of mind to a restaurant operator, linens, staffing, foodstuffs that go into the cost of goods sold, those are top of mind. Technology isn't. So to them, it just feels like expense.
Yeah.
It feels like the POS or the phone line. So you're trying to talk to them about marketing and channels and new customers and conversation, all those things that in the tech world we take for granted. To them, it is Latin. This is Greek. And they better, you better have someone who's open to that discovery to close that sale efficiently. Otherwise, you're going to be at it for a while.
Yeah, and a completely different sell, obviously. Selling into the restaurants or selling to the individual restaurants, the value proposition for them is drastically different to the guy who sells technology already into those restaurants. Because if he can make an extra margin on the transactions, you don't have to convince him beyond that. Listen, it's easy, it implements, we can do this very quickly, and you make money off of this, and you've got the relationships.
And I would say, for our conversation, mobile especially is tricky because they're not walking around all day, right? They don't go out for lunch the same way we do.
Yeah.
But at least they all have that phone you held up, or their kids do, or their parents do.
And their patrons do.
Their patrons do. So I think mobile has an opportunity to leapfrog a little bit over what pure web did. And I think that's actually what makes mobile perhaps the most interesting technological shift or potential shift in the restaurant industry ever. Because it is suddenly that there are a million new conversations happening everywhere. And your ability to insert yourself into your customer's line of march so that they can find out about you as they're walking past your store and connect with you. There are some really interesting companies that are doing things around that local moment of discovery. Yeah. Finding that customer in the moment when they are geofenced within 2 blocks of that store. And I think that's where real wins are going to come in, as long as obviously the economics of that connection makes sense for a restaurant as well. And there's value on both sides of that, because I think a lot of app developers in the mobile space think only about the consumer, not about the merchant. But as long as there's value on both sides of that equation, restaurant operators have unbelievable opportunity, and because of the nature of mobile is in their pocket, now the technology can follow them from the stock room to the front of the house to the back door where the vegetable guy is dropping off supplies. So a little bit you put computing power in their fingertips and the ability to connect with customers in new ways at the same time. So this may be the breakthrough for restaurant technology.
I love hearing that, because it's a lot of people would challenge me on this, and when I say that, like, mobile in your business, it doesn't matter what business you are in, like whatever business you are in around the entire planet, and I mean that quite literally. Whatever business is in, there is a mobile play. You've got to find it. It's not an app for every business. It's not a mobile website for every business. It might be an SMS or an MMS or some combination, but for every business. And I often get ridiculed. They say, okay, dry cleaner, and that's an easy one. And restaurants, well, that's an easy one. It's beyond ordering, because, as you said, ordering is one aspect of it, which is a very important piece. But it's also about customer engagement and getting in, and as Gary Vaynerchuk calls it, small town rules, where you're learning more about your customers, so that in this very competitive world, you're in the middle of it, New York City, in this very competitive world, and especially in the restaurants, it's about getting that guy or that girl or that family to come back a second time, and a third time.
Across the street. Just walk across the street, because there's something valuable on the other side of the street. I can't tell you how many times I make decisions with a group of friends. We're sitting on a street corner. Where do we eat? This just happened to me a few weeks ago. And we're all looking on our phones at someone's in Foursquare, someone's on Yelp, someone's looking in Stamped, which is a startup doing some interesting stuff. And we're all looking for the right restaurant. And no one was thinking more than 3 blocks away.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Talk about local and the power of technology. And I think it's now working, but it's not just empowering consumers. The fact that you can put that conversation in the manager's pocket, because mobile works for them too.
Yeah.
right? They can't be at a desk on an old on an old computer. We use, I have my Dell. I have two old Dells sitting under my desk here in my office. They don't have this until the end of the shift at 11:30 at night. But everyone's got a phone in their pocket, so it powers the restaurant operator too. And that's where I think mobile in restaurants. That's why mobile is more powerful for restaurants than the web was.
And certainly is. I mean, I look at expiring inventory, and a table that isn't sat is an expiring inventory, and at some point there is a value that's affixed to that, and it declines as the night goes on, right? And the desperation might set in to fill that table. But so everybody, especially in the restaurant industry, ran to coupons, right? Smaller industries ran to rewarding mayors and check-ins and this kind of thing. So let me ask you about that kind of stuff. Is that where should restaurants begin if they're looking at the mobile space right now, saying, "Oh, it's overwhelming. Okay, I'll just do a Foursquare special." And then, or like a scavenger special, or a level up special or something like that, where ultimately you're not creating loyalty for your customer. You're just getting them in the door and trying to impress the hell out of them. But you've set an expectation of price at that point. So I don't think that's the right way. Where do they start?
I think the first place, if I ran a restaurant, the first place I would start is not the deals, it's not the coupons, it's not the specials, it's in the conversations, right? It's making sure I was on Yelp and Google Places, and I had Twitter and I had Facebook, and I actually use these tools not to be just promotional, like, hey, tonight we have steak, but hey, let me tell you about the guy, the farm that supplies us with meat, so you understand something about us and our cooking philosophy. Use those conversation tools effectively. That's where I would start. And when I felt comfortable about how those conversations were going, then I would think about the value that a daily deal site or a couponing service or a mayor special or one of those things, where does that fit in those conversations? I wouldn't do it the other way around. I think too many people leap at the Groupon or the Living Social or those deal sites, which they often get negative press in the restaurant industry. I think that there can be value there, but that is not the value of interactive services for restaurants. So I think you start with a conversation and then you figure out where the rest of it fits, not the other way around.
It's really interesting. This is a small town example. There is a social media expert. Her name is Amber MacArthur. She goes by the moniker of Amber Mac. Very, very bright, intelligent woman around this stuff. And she's an influencer, obviously. And in her neighborhood in Toronto, there's a tiny little restaurant that kind of posted up basically the Amber Mac burger, right? And they said, hey, listen, we've created the Amber Mac burger. It's this. It's the combination of ingredients, obviously. And then they pushed out a Twitter post saying, hey, listen, we've got the @Amber Mac burger, and it drew her attention. She went in. It was on a big board, sandwich board outside. She went in. She did a Twitter post about it, started to generate activity. It was kind of like, it kind of swelled like that with a simple, thoughtful approach.
They engaged in a conversation, and they put themselves into a large. I would say they put themselves into a larger conversation in a way that contributed. Yeah. Right. They weren't trying to take. They were adding. They were adding a point of interest into the larger conversation Amber Mac has with all of her followers. Right.
The reason it started was because she quite literally just moved into the neighborhood, and she pushed it out through Twitter. Hey, this is my new neighborhood. Boom, an opportunity, right, like that. Like, awesome. Pretty incredible, eh?
It's a perfect example of how a restaurant should engage with these new technologies, especially things that are so easily mobile, like Twitter, right? Yeah. It is getting into that conversation with your customers, even customers you don't know yet. And having that dialogue and being part of that ecosystem, that's awesome. I love that story. Thanks for sharing.
It's great. And so did she. And the burger was great, so she said. And it stuck with me. Too bad. I wish I could remember the name of the restaurant, but it stuck with me.
I guarantee you right now, people watching the show are going to be searching for Amber Mac and trying to figure out where that is. And
Amber Mac burger.
The Amber Mac burger.
The Amber Mac burger. Let me ask. I want to change tack here a little bit, because one of the things that was really interesting when I was reading up about you guys is that you are a Google venture backed company. You accepted Google venture money from Google, and you wrote a blog post about this, which was really interesting. You said, "Look, we're not going to accept money from anybody. We slept on this. We didn't jump at the deal." Can you talk us through that process where you're kind of building this company, and were you out there looking for money?
I would say we were cruising. We were looking around to see what opportunities existed. Because we were interested in raising money if the right opportunity presented itself. Yeah. And when Google comes knocking, you got to take that seriously, right? There are fewer companies that have been more successful in the internet ever. Like, it's hard to, Facebook, nothing compares to Google, right? No. And their particular corporate interest in local and being in relevance for local jibes very well with what we're trying to accomplish. So I think for us, you had the backing, the potential backing of one of the most exciting and powerful players in the internet, who has a particular interest in local, and has, and just the way they've set up the Google Ventures the Google Ventures team has a lot of expertise and support services for their portfolio. I don't want to say it made it a no-brainer, but let me tell you, I didn't have to sleep on it 2 nights. No. I had to sleep on it. My team had to sleep on it about 1 night, and then we went back to it.
And so that's obviously what they're looking at, is that they're looking around, and Google is about local search. The way that they formulated the algorithms for mobile search, where they're rewarding companies that have properly formatted websites for mobile devices. So obviously this is a big battle that's brewing that we're just at the beginning of, and Google is at the center of this.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I can't speak for them, but what I will tell you, the kind of conversations I have with them, it's the space itself. It's local commerce, right? Yeah. It's getting into that transaction. It's local at all, right? Just content at all, because we have all the menus, we have all that restaurant information, our APIs. But they're also interested in the ability to scale, right? It's not just, you can't just be big in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago. You gotta show that you can do something that's huge. Yep. And I think our particular approach to the market, where we're not out there with 200 people calling up restaurants and begging them to send us their latest menu, is very appealing. It's a Google, we're building a Google scale business here for restaurants globally, ultimately globally, and I think that helps differentiate us from other possibilities. Also, we're taking a B2B approach. So while we may have some apps that individual consumers interact with that we manage ourselves, we take all the code from those apps and we put them on our Git, make them publicly available. Because we're doing this not because we want to replace the existing food ordering apps that are out there. We just want to learn about it so that we can be helpful to our partners. We're rolling out a whole new mobile code base right now, and the people who are helping us design and develop it, I think didn't really get the idea that this code we were going to publicly deliver this code. Yeah. Like, we actually are promoting people to steal our code. Nice. Not stealing, take it please, because we want there to be a lot of apps, and we want there to be a lot of innovation in the space, because it's good for restaurants, it's good for consumers, and ultimately that means it's good for us and the developers who work with us. Yeah. So it really it's an interesting mindset, and I think that differentiation also appealed to Google. Well, but again, you have to ask them.
And I'd love to. If anybody out there from Google is interested in coming on and answering this question, I'd love it. I've spent a number of episodes, certainly with Google invested companies, but it's also so beneficial to Google, because when you're doing a local search and you get the menu of the restaurant across the street or right next to you, right? Or when you can actually do, scan a QR code or NFC or anything along those at the restaurant, and you gather all that information. I mean, this just solidifies Google from a global standpoint all the way down to what's on my street corner, right? It's pretty amazing.
I mean, imagine if you're walking down the street and you speak into Google search, sandwich shop within 2 blocks of here. Yeah. And instead of just getting a list of links, you actually got menus that you can transact with right there. like that's my vision. I hope it's Google's vision, but that's the kind of ubiquity we want to bring to this industry, so that restaurants don't have to worry about the 57 links and the 27 ways that their site is being looked at. That transaction can happen right where the consumer is. Yeah. The restaurant goes to the customer, yeah. and that's what we really get excited by.
It's really interesting because when you look at what this which actually can facilitate, with a Siri-like interface, right? And I know Google has purchased a company that does the same thing, but Siri is a benefit to Google as well, simply because a localized search, Siri can go out and do the search in Google and pull up the information and automate that ordering process. And you start to think about that, just on a massive scale. It's about finding the right food at the right time for these people, and that's probably what this enables.
I think, look, we look at mobile probably a little bit differently than most people look at mobile. And you and I haven't discussed this yet, but we look at mobile not as your phone, but as where you are and how you engage with your environment.
Sure.
So for us, it's not just the phone and the app. It's about putting the restaurant and the restaurant's content wherever it makes sense for you.
Yep.
Mobility is about the mobility of information, not just about you walking around with a phone in your pocket. And I think mobile as a category is maturing in a really exciting way. Voice activation makes so much more possible than was possible before. You can now have a conversation with your computer and a conversation sort of with the internet while you're driving a car, while you're talking to your TV. All kinds of things become possible that weren't possible before because of voice activation, and who knows what comes next. That's what gets really exciting.
Well, as you're talking about it, is like, it's one of those things that when you start to think about what the possibilities here are, and you're going to start to see these applications, especially on the mobile devices, that say, listen, I have a specific diet that I need to adhere to. I'm in a different city. I'm on this street, or I'm in this office, in this hotel, and my diet is in my device, right? It's part of it in an application, and it will tell me where I can go and eat, what food I should have. That's where it's going to get so localized, and it's all going to be done, and I can order it right from the phone. I can do all those kind of things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, very interesting. What you're just defining is not just localization by geography, but really localization by also personalization, right? It's the idea that all this stuff is all around you, where you go, what you need, what you like. All of this data flows around you. That's why when in my company, when we talk about the mobility of data, this is sort of what we're really talking about here. Look, at a hackathon, someone built an app that was a sandwich finder. Like, they loved sandwiches. So they built an app using our API that looked for the word sandwich in our API, and you could say, I want something with avocado and turkey, and it would say, here are the 5 places to order a sandwich that has the words avocado and turkey in it.
Yeah.
Right? Look, there may be only 1,000 people in the world who would ever use that app, but now there's an app for them.
Yeah.
Right? I love that. Like, there's a kid who made a command line interface app so that when he's coding, he never has to leave his command line to order food. Now, it doesn't get dorkier than that, but that's brilliant. It is the ubiquity of information and the ability to then, and what we love is the ability to transact with that information that we get so excited by. Again, there may only be 1,000 people who would ever care about a command interface app, but now for those 1,000 people, there's a perfect tool just for them.
I love it. And, you can start to see, like, just confirmation. It's 6 o'clock. You're hungry. You want to order what you usually order. Yes. And have it arrive, right? I gotta ask one last question around this. Around your rollout strategy. You said that was really interesting, is that, it's not just about New York or LA, it's about the big, big centers like this. It is about a global rollout, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why Google is interested in you guys, because it is that kind of play. But in your head, I mean, do you start in New York, perfect it in New York, and then move it to different cities, or do you just say, we're going to let it bloom?
We're letting it bloom.
Okay.
Because for us...
Is that a conscious strategy?
Yeah, actually, it really was. I think for us, the issue was our true, I don't want to say our only value, but one of our value props is that we are everywhere. When I was at Amex, I had 60 million people that I was responsible for. And sure, a lot of
It's a
them
big
were in New
family.
York and in San Francisco,
Yeah.
but a lot of them were in random other places, or they pulled off the highway someplace when they were on a trip, and they wanted to eat or find a
Yeah.
place to sleep or whatever it may be. So for us, since we're integrating people through software, since we're not out there selling individual restaurants, it almost doesn't matter to us whether you're in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, or New York City.
Yeah.
And we actually have a partner in Sheboygan who's, by the way, really good at social media. If she's out there, Charlene from I'm Hungry Sheboygan is really good with Twitter and Facebook and Foursquare. So for us, we have there's no difference in our cost structure whether we're acquiring a partner in Sheboygan or New York City to acquire, onboard, or manage them. It's all the same to us. So we really can go anywhere we want. And unlike having to go out and source independent restaurants and manage them, well, there's a heavy fixed cost to that.
Yeah.
To acquire and manage. We don't have those things, so we really can go anywhere. And when I talk to clients who are using our API, especially the bigger brands, they love that. That's critical to them. I had one partner who joked with me, when we were going through our deal cycle, I'm going to need more restaurants in McAllen, Texas, than I'm going to need them in New York City.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I went back to, we had a follow-up meeting to go over points in the contract, and I said, oh, by the way, I got 25 restaurants in McAllen, Texas.
Nice.
Let me tell you, his smile was awesome. And that's part of the value of an aggregated marketplace, this consolidated marketplace through our API that really gets exciting. That guy in McAllen, Texas with his 25 restaurants, he now has the ability to work with some of the biggest brands in the world when he never would have even been on their radar before we came along. And all those restaurants are now doing cool things, and they may not even know, right? But because they're part of this network, cool things are happening. That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm loath to ask this question because you, David, I feel it right now. But what are you really looking forward to in the next 12 months in the mobile industry, in your space? Is there anything that just kind of sticks out and says, "Oh, we are on such a roll. This industry is what we're doing in the mobile space or mobile in restaurants is going to."
I think what's going to be what I look forward to the next 12 months for us as a company is the ability for anyone to roll out a food ordering app in 15 minutes. And we're building a whole series of products that are going to make that possible. That to me is going to be amazing. And for the industry and mobile generally, I think it's just this whole cultural moment where mobile technologies and the ability to connect with customers is becoming so mainstream that even my mother has a Path account now. She leapfrogged past Facebook and went to Path, right? That to me is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think restaurants are going to have that same leapfrog effect, and I think this is the year a lot of that starts to happen.
I love it, David. I think we probably carry on this conversation, restaurant guy to old restaurant guy. Saw so many failings, opportunities in the restaurant industry back when I was a part of it. Being a waiter is my fallback position still to this day.
It's a good one.
Most people have lawyers or degrees and doctors. I took an entrepreneurial route, and so waitering has been my backup for this plan forever. So at one point, though I hope it doesn't happen, if I am a waiter, I hope that it's in a restaurant that is actually interacting with what you're doing with Order In.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thanks.
It's very cool. How do people find out about what you're up to?
So we've had a little bit of. So we went through the TechStars program in New York. So that helped raise our profile.
Yeah.
We got an investment, obviously, from Google Ventures that raised our profile. We are just starting to do some marketing. We've been extremely quiet until now, but we're just starting to do some marketing. So hopefully you'll be hearing about us in the trade press for restaurants, not just in the tech press. But we're out there on Twitter. We're out there. We'll be increasingly on Facebook, and we'll be doing some pretty interesting stuff one-on-one with local restaurant groups too. So lots of ways.
And on the web, it's Order In, ORDR.
.in, and you can follow us on Twitter at ORDRIN, ORDRIN.
Yeah, it's a great. I love the domain name. I guess orderin.com was probably $1 million acquisition right there.
There was a lot of money involved in that, but we got our domain name over a really nice meal in my kitchen and 2 bottles of wine. Amazing with some brainstorming and some rapid fire domain searching can do for you.
I love it. And then the business forms after that.
Yeah, actually funny. A quick funny story. I named the business for my wife, who, when I went off and did this entrepreneurial venture, I figured I had to give her something, so I named the company after her. I think she didn't really love the idea that our family fortunes were resting on a company of her own name, so we pivoted off that name to Order In. I think we're all happier for it.
It's so funny. It's great. Well, it shapes it. Definitely great name. Go to ORDR. That's order.in. Order In. I've been speaking with David Bloom, who's the founder and CEO of this company. And if you've used this service, or if you have ordered anything with this API or this technology, you're a developer, or you're using it, I'd love to hear from you. And of course, reach out at untether@gmail.com. Let me know how you like it. I can't wait to use something like this, an app that is powered by Ordered In. David, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. Late at night. This is the entrepreneurial world that we live in. I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks so much for being on Untether.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and all the best to you guys. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, and you are listening to this or watching this, I so much appreciate it. The fact that you do that every time that an episode comes up means a whole lot to me. I'd love your feedback. If there's a company that you'd like me to be covering, if you'd like to comment on this, if you'd like to reach out to David, do it at untether@gmail.com. I respond to all my emails, and as they come in. I really appreciate you guys watching it. David, thank you so much for being a part of it. You guys who are watching, see you next time on untether.tv. See you.